Hi, my name is Alyssa Monteleone, and I am the Director of Consult at CA Fortune, and I run a program for emerging brands called Kickstart. And our goal is to prepare brands to effectively leverage a sales team and launch with a strategic approach towards getting on shelf and being successful in the US grocery market. I come to this with a pretty diverse amount of experience. I started as a buyer at a co-op in Boston. And then I moved into the brokerage world. I then worked for a major distributor and worked in the warehouse for a short period of time. I rode in a truck once. That was probably one of the most educational moments in my career, to be very honest with you. I learned a lot during that experience. And I then moved back into the brokerage world. I've been with CA Fortune for just about 6 years now, and had the opportunity to work with emerging brands on a daily basis and absolutely love it, and am still learning every single day.
I'm Stuart Kennedy. I'm one of the co-founders of Vividly, which is a trade management solution for small to mid-size CPG companies. My career started in CPG. I worked at brands like Justin's, Perfect Snacks, and Lily's. At each of those companies, I was managing trade and forecasting and category management, and was really fortunate to work with some wonderful founders that I learned a lot from and helped shape the way I've led and been a founder myself within a different industry of tech. And I'm really excited to be here and chat with Alyssa and learn a lot from her. All right. So I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is the ability to filter out all the noise and stick to your belief and your goal that you have. And also alongside that, being really good at taking risks and kind of ignoring a lot of the risks, because I think your average person that assesses all the risks that go into starting a business, especially a CPG business, I think would make most people give up really early on or decide this isn't worth it. This isn't what I want to do. And I think a good CPG founder has to be able to filter that all out and really believe in themselves and what they're doing and what their mission is to be able to strive forward, because it is a long journey that takes a lot of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And I've seen it with each of the founders I've worked with, this ability to just take risks that I think most people would turn around and leave the room if they were confronted with those risks. But instead they kind of say, oh, I can handle that. I'll just keep moving forward. And it's a unique personality trait that I think is just so important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that your statement about it being the long haul, entering into the CPG space with a brand is definitely not a get rich quick scheme, for sure. Having the perseverance to move through the obstacles, and there's a lot of advice out there. And I think that, to your point of like filtering out some of that and just staying focused on what your mission is, I think you want to consider what folks are saying. You don't want to have a deaf ear to it, but I think to use it as a way to be aware and to, think through things strategically with that in mind, but yet still, push through and understand that there's going to be failures, or there's going to be moments where you feel like you're stalled a little bit. You just have to keep at it, because all of a sudden it seems like sometimes the floodgates open and you just never know when that's going to be. So be prepared. When you start a new business, whether you're a new founder or someone who's started other businesses and, have that level of experience, coming to it with a beginner's mindset is really valuable, because there is certainly leadership skills and, business understanding that will benefit you from any prior experience. But I do believe that the CPG space does have some unique aspects to it that really genuinely need to be understood and not theoretically. They need to be experienced, because as we talked about before, you don't know what you don't know, and you have to, what worked for one company doesn't necessarily work for another company, even within the CPG industry itself, much less if you're trying to, bridge the gap between, an old industry and then moving into CPG. I think that having the willingness to have that learning mindset and being willing to take each experience for what it is, with the notion that it's going to then lead to a better decision. And I think the other piece of it is surrounding yourself with folks who can also support you, because a lot of times when a founder starts a CPG business is because they're passionate about something. Either they want to, have cleaner ingredients, or they want to do better at sourcing, or they recognize that there's a big gap and there's white space, in a certain category or something like that. And that's where the passion is. But the business side of it, there's so much. There's the finances, there's, the operational aspects, there's understanding promotions, there's the manufacturing, there's the co-packing, or whatever the case may be. And trying to do it all on your own, a lot of founders start with a very small team, which is totally fine, and that's where you need to start. But always keeping your eye on, okay, as I scale, how do I want to start identifying the areas that I could use support and be able to then grow using that support, so that I can keep passionate and stay focused on why I started this business, and not just get distracted and overwhelmed, and not want to play anymore.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything Alyssa said. And I would add that, if you've been a founder in another space and you're coming into CPG, the more you can treat it as if you have zero experience ever being a founder, I think the better it is going to be for you. There are so many ins and outs, even within the industry itself. I mean, if I started working for a company that was highly food service related, I would feel like I was starting all over again in my CPG career, because I haven't been in that space before. So being aware of that, I think, is so, so important. Some other aspects I would say compared to other industries, in CPG, you can, let's say that overnight you get into Costco. You could go from like a $5 million company to a $40 million projected revenue company in one night. And that type of massive jump, even still with a small number of employees, it is, I think, pretty unique in the economy. And I think that it's really important to be aware of that, what that can do to you as a person, of suddenly feeling like this big jump in success, but yet now the real work has begun. If you end up not having a good relationship with that retailer, you're probably not going to get another swing at the plate with them.
Yeah.
So I think that's super, super important. So you can have these massive jumps in your journey, but you have to be so careful with each of those jumps and so intentional with each of those jumps, and also not let it get to your head. I think that's super, super important. And I think the other thing I'll mention is with CPG, like the product that you're making is so tangible. It has such an impact on people's lives. You're literally putting it in your body. It has an effect on their health. And so the impact that you're having with the people that are using your product, I think, can be a lot deeper than other industries. I mean, I've talked to folks where they see, oh my gosh, your Perfect Bar, that's the only item I could ever get my mother to eat when she was in chemo or something. Like, these things, I think, have a higher level of importance with human beings in general. I think being aware of that as you change industries is really important.
Yeah, I think that that's so on point. And with the idea that this is a consumable product, and that people, depending on what it is, can genuinely be using it every single day. And you're going to have a level of responsibility to the integrity of that. And, I think you're right. Like, that balancing act between taking it personally, both the good and the bad, and the highs and the lows, it can be very draining. So I think that doing the work to find balance outside of your business, is incredibly important because, like you said, you get that big win and you're so excited. And then it's so hard to like do all the work that to make that big win come to fruition. And then now you were so excited and now oh, it's too much and it's overwhelming. And the day-to-day back and forth can just be big swings. So having that daily practice of, whether you meditate or you exercise or you breathe or you eat your own food because it's so high quality or whatever it is, whatever you need to do to kind of like when that pendulum swings, make sure that, you can stay centered because again, as we mentioned, it's for the long haul. So you've got to like maintain that steady energy throughout the process.
I'll say on the positive side, I've seen a lot of it from the founders I've worked with is the highly intentional and disciplined decision to have work-life balance. And I think it also kind of goes into some of the negative that I think you're so passionate about your business, it's growing, there's success, there's all these stresses. How do I find that balance? And I think for all of us, sometimes it is hard to find that balance and to be super intentional about that. But I've seen it as this trend across all these wonderful founders I've gotten to work with that they are ruthlessly careful about that balance to be able to go back into work the next day with a full tank. I mean, Justin, for example, I remember, the business was really growing and he hadn't taken a vacation in a very long time when he finally said, I'm going to the Grand Canyon. I'm not going to have a phone. It's impossible for everybody to contact me. You won't be able to do it. And I'm going to go on this trip. And like setting those boundaries are so important. And with the Keith family, being so careful to give their own personal families the time and attention they needed, to be going to the gym, to be going on that run, to go on that vacation. Yes, your business is super important, but if you don't take care of yourself first, then you're going to make mistakes with the business and you're not going to have the longevity possible physically and mentally to do so. So I would say I've seen those as positive traits across all the founders I've worked with. But on the flip side of that, I think everyone struggles in keeping that right balance, avoiding the burnout side of things. I mean, and I can say kind of for myself being a founder, very early on, not knowing how to handle adversity in the right way when it was something negative with the business. Maybe a customer leaves and it's the first time it happens, not taking those things personally, learning from it and moving forward and allowing yourself to just brush it off and keep looking forward. Because if you just dwell on those things, it'll eat you alive.
Yeah, I think that idea of being able to fill your tank is vital. I think everybody does that differently. One of the things that I think is true in any business, but definitely in the CPG business are building relationships and, having a positive attitude and treating people respectfully and thoughtfully, being, you had mentioned like being thoughtful in your response and those kinds of things. That requires a well-rested person. If you are exhausted and burning the candles at both ends, just our patience is short, especially with ourselves. We can just be really frustrated and there's a lot of demands on your time. So being respectful of your own time and setting those boundaries, even just on the daily basis. I think that, the vacations and the time away is helpful, but it's also the day to day, the willingness to say, okay, I'm going to spend this block of time answering emails and then I'm shutting the door, and I'm going to focus on my strategic plan for, the next quarter. And this period of time, I'm going to go and I'm going to take a walk and I'm going to actually eat lunch. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm going to focus on. One lesson that I learned in a training I had done years ago was the idea of being singularly focused versus multitasking. And that the idea that you can multitask is a black and white lie. There is no such thing as multitasking. You have this much focus. And if you divide that focus, then the results are going to also be divided in both of areas that you're working on. You know what I mean? So, setting those boundaries for both your productive time as well as your, relaxing time. The other piece of it is that founders are often incredibly creative people. And that creativity, they say, well, it comes when you're in the shower. It comes in the spaces in between. And if you're not nurturing those opportunities to have that in between space, that creative flow can get halted. And you're always innovating in CPG, right? The thing that drives the business is always the innovation, even within your own profile, within your own brand profiles. So having that's what keeps us going. That's what keeps us jazzed about what we're doing, because the day-to-day can become a little monotonous or frustrating. But when we get to look ahead at what the next innovation, the next, flavor or whatever it is that we're coming up with that got us excited in the first place, we have to be able to have the mental space to be able to do that. Yeah, that's interesting. I have a side hustle that I'm a founder myself, but not a scalable founder, which is probably one of the most outstanding reasons why I have a huge amount of respect for founders that actually go out there and go big. I run a business where I teach kids about nutrition. I'm just very passionate about the fact that what we put into our bodies feeds our minds, our emotions, as well as, of course, our bodies themselves. And the willingness and the ability to delegate and empower someone else to, take the reins and go in a certain aspect of the business is very challenging, I think, for a lot of founders, because, it's kind of like your baby. And, you want to own and, push this thing forward. Having the awareness that you can't do it all yourself, and having the faith that you can give tasks or full areas of your business to outside folks or even people within your own company, whether you're going to be working with a broker or hiring a director of sales or bringing on technology to help support an aspect of your business. I think that as a founder, you need to definitely keep tabs on each aspect of, the overall picture, but you don't have to do it all yourself. You cannot scale if you do that. You will get burned out eventually. And I think it's just a lot more fun, if you're working with other people. So I think that's my biggest lesson is, my willingness to recognize that can be very challenging to do, but it's absolutely mandatory.
It's exactly, I was going to say the exact same thing. I mean, this is so important. And I'm so thankful for the founders I got to work with and to have learned this from them in my own journey of being a founder, of having that self-awareness, to know what your own limitations are and when to be okay with trusting other people with experience that have done these things before and allow them to own those certain things. I mean, an example is with Justin. There was a moment in the business where he brought in a CEO, Peter Burns, one of the better leaders I've ever worked with in my career. And that self-awareness, the company is called Justin's, right? Like, it's part of his identity in so many ways. And he had the self-awareness to say, hey, to really get where we want to go, I need somebody that's done this multiple times. I don't have to write the playbook as I go, and they can help guide me. And I think I certainly use that as we've grown vividly and we've hired executives and brought on a CEO and those different things, of being excited to bring on this person and say, hey, I trust you to own this whole aspect of the business. And you should own this thing. I haven't done this 4 times like you have. And it's best for the business to allow everyone to be creative and use their experience, because I'm just one person, and like you mentioned, Alyssa, I would just burn out if I tried to do everything and not let go. And I think some founders do have a really hard time with letting go, and that personal growth of knowing when to do that and to have that self-awareness to do so, it is an absolute must trait, in my opinion, for when you really break that moment of scale. You can
Yeah.
only take it so far. And the last thing I'll say that I learned from all the founders I worked with is the culture starts with you.
Yeah.
Like the Keith family, it sounds like a cliche. You join the company and they would say, you're part of the family now. And it's like, okay, yeah, whatever. But it was so true. Like literally, like every time I'm flying out to San Diego, they're giving hugs and everything. And they're really actually curious about what's going on in my life and how I'm doing and all these different aspects. Just the excitement, the energy, like it starts with you, and it is contagious. It is super, super contagious. And I didn't realize until I became a founder myself how much energy goes into doing that.
Yeah.
You might have a really bad day and you're still putting on that face and leading that culture and leading that positivity. It's not easy day after day, year after year. And those are just so, so, so important. And I just have so much respect for those founders and those aspects that they've really excelled at.
Yeah. And, I think that, Stuart, you brought up a really important word, which was trust, and recognizing the skills and the asking the good questions to figure out who it is you can trust, and then surrendering to a degree with that trust. I think that, one of the things that in the company that I work with, CA Fortune, we have done this work for a long time and we've had great success. And when we work with founders and emerging brands that trust the process, we just find that it is, first of all, much more pleasant of an experience, and also that there is a momentum that can build. Growing a business responsibly requires a lot of patience, and it requires a lot of that trust factor in both the people that you empower to help you manage your business, as well as patience in the process. And sometimes when you're new in an industry, you feel as though like people are taking advantage of you, or why is everything so expensive, or that process doesn't make any sense. And I think that it's important to question. I think it's important to challenge, because sometimes the truth is that it's not, fair, or there was a mistake made, or maybe we can do something differently. But by the same token, trusting that people are out for your best interest, that, if you working with the right people, that you have a mutual goal, that it's going to be a win-win, and that, you're all working to grow each other's businesses. Or if you're, if it's somebody that you're hiring and they're a part of your sales team, again, that there's just that mutual benefit. I think that really trusting is hugely valuable to the experience that you have when you're trying to grow a business. I want to cue this up for Stu to then take over, because I think that I'm going to set you up for your answer, because you're going to probably speak far more articulately about this than I will. When you're starting out, you want to set, like, what are those key indicators for success? How are you going to start to measure your success, and what is the timeline? I think that there's a lot of desire to be able to forecast and predict. And in the beginning, there's no data other than, large scale category data. You don't have your own data to start to be able to do those predictions and, break out the crystal ball. But as you're developing that, there's a huge focus on the number of doors that you go out there to get. How many doors did we get? How many points of distribution did we achieve, versus quality, and understanding how much it costs for you to get that number of doors, and how long is it going to take you? What does your return on investment start to allow you to be profitable? And the answer to that is different depending on the doors that you achieve, the doors that you got. And the other thing that I would say to that point is getting on shelf costs money. Staying on shelf makes you money. So while you need to get on shelf and you need a strategy to get to those doors and to gain distribution, understanding how you're going to stay on shelf and get the consumer to have brand awareness and purchase your product so that you have the velocities that you need to stay on shelf and start to turn profit is extremely important. And there's a lot of tools out there that can support that and can start building out better ways to both predict and forecast that, as well as measure it as it happens so that you can always improve that. And that's why partnering with the right people is so valuable to having those learning curves shortened so that you can start to understand how it's going to work for your business.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where there's so much going on, there's so many things to focus on. But actually, you can simplify things. Like if you surround yourself with great people with a lot of experience, that's going to already check a ton of boxes. And the other piece is you need to just focus on a few things and really execute those things very, very, very well, instead of thinking these are all the things I need to do, because you're just going to do all of those just okay. So identifying like what are the handful of things that my company, my employees, and myself need to be laser focused on, and anything else is deemed as a distraction. And to Alyssa's point around getting on shelf and the importance of driving trial, I'll just give an example here. So with Perfect Bar, the founders got into one Whole Food store, and it wasn't, oh my gosh, we got into a store, we're done. The work then began. They literally slept in a van in the parking lot of that Whole Foods store, and every single day, all day, would demo the product. And then at night, they would go to the commercial kitchen and make more product. And then they got into 3 stores and 4 stores and 5 stores, and they're driving around just demoing constantly to all these locations. And when you look back on it, what they were doing was they were laser focused on one thing, which was having people taste their product for the first time. That's it. And so, and they probably didn't realize it at the time that they were laser focused on this one thing. And that's just an example of focusing on that one aspect. You have to drive trial. You just have to get your product in people's hands and get rid of the rest of the noise. So, for me, it's like coming up with that list, driving trial and market awareness, revenue, EBITDA, like there's really not much else. There's a lot of little things that roll up into those, but like in the end, those are some of the North Stars. So determining like what are my few North Stars is so important, and being able to filter out the rest will allow you to really succeed in those specific areas. And the last thing I'll say is there's kind of like the sexy fun part of, oh, we're like creating these fun tasting products and stuff, but then there's the financials and there's like trade spend and Excel spreadsheets. Like you do also have to master the business side and be really intentional about the business side. And it's one of those things where if you just have the right mindset of saying, even though you think like, I don't really like this stuff, changing that. I love doing this. I love making my business efficient as possible. Just changing the way you think about these things, and not just kind of focusing on like, oh, let's come out with a new flavor. Those other aspects, kind of the mundane side of the business, is so important. And just kind of an example of what I mean by this is I have yet to see a brand where in their early years does not come out with way too many flavors of a certain product group. And then what they end up doing is, they have 8 different flavors and the consumers really love 3 of them. And then somebody goes to the store and they try one of the flavors that is not one of your top 3, let's say, and your chance of making them into a repeatable buyer has gone down significantly because they didn't try one of your best items. And so like it's like the SKU rationalization side of things. And that's just an example of overthinking things. You probably don't need more products. You probably don't need more flavors. Like what are the few things that are doing well, identify those and get those in everywhere, and do everything you can to make those successful. So kind of a long-winded answer there, but it's kind of about focus in the end.
You know, Stu, I'm curious what your thoughts are when you say that, because it seems like there's this like accordion component to CPG where you need to innovate. And then they're saying, okay, well, what's next? And then on like the other side of the coin, there'll be like SKU rationalization. We need to focus, you know what I mean? So there just seems to be this need to kind of like, ebb and flow on a regular basis. And, what are your thoughts on how to manage that? You know what I mean? Because you do have to, you can't be stale, but on the other side of that, you have to manage your resources. And to your point, like if you start to dilute the brand, then you're in trouble. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is a really difficult balance to find. And I think that one, using innovation as a way to flourish your partnerships with your retailers is just great. Being able to like partner with, let's say, Whole Foods on, let's come out with this innovation and it'll be an exclusive with you. Like you're starting to build these really valuable long-term relationships with these people. And maybe that innovation doesn't work out, but there's actually a lot that came out of it. So I think that helping relationships drive these decisions, I think, is very important instead of just innovating for the sake of innovating.
Yeah.
I also think that it's easy to overthink innovation. And what I mean by this is, so Justin came out with an almond butter and a few flavors. And then instead of like, oh, I want to come up with this other completely different thing and it's in frozen or whatever, he just took the jars and put them in squeeze packs. It was just a smaller amount of the exact same product and it made it to go. Not that difficult. Or came out with a peanut butter cup and then said, let's just make mini ones too. There's not a whole lot that you have to do to change things. And another example is with Perfect Bar. They didn't have to do all these different things. It's like, hey, let's layer the bar with chocolate. Let's come out with some that are smaller and have slightly different ingredients for kids. It doesn't have to be these massive leaps. It's more efficient for production. It's more efficient for, acquiring of ingredients, like all these different things. So don't think that to make a big impact in innovation, you have to take giant leaps. And the last kind of thing I'll say about this is, I think that the more important thing than figuring out the right innovation is noticing when you have hero SKUs and then really, really, really leaning into those. I mean, I think of a brand like Pirates Booty, grew really fast and succeeded, and they basically had like one item. Or Perfect Bar, it really came down to like 3 to 5 flavors, and it became $100 million brand off of 5 items. Or Justin's with just a peanut butter cup, becoming tens and $100 million off of just a peanut butter cup. So you can get so much out of just a few things, and when you notice that, really leaning into that, you can get way more juice from the squeeze than coming up with kind of more iterations of things.
Yeah. And when you were talking about the Perfect Bar and them being in the van, and doing that like whole thing and just really like driving trial, one of my mantras is the number one thing is, does it taste good? Like, and the fact that that it tastes good is not really like, that's awesome. But what you need to get other people on board and to try it and to like it. And if you get feedback that something's not working, be respectful of your consumer and what the consumer needs are, what the consumer's tastes are, what their, definition of it tastes good is. One of the things that I was really thinking about as you were talking, however, was, these stories of these brands that blow up and they just, off this one innovation, make all of this money. I think that when we were talking about like what the mindset is and like how you get through the day and maintain, the passion and all of that is really in the very beginning, and each year think about, what is my goal? in to define for yourself, is this a lifestyle for me? Is this something where I want to make enough money to love my life and have the freedom, or the kind of lifestyle that it allows me to have for either staying really busy, because some people love that, or does it give me enough financial resources to be able to go and travel and do what I want to do, or at least, drive my own time or something? Or are you looking to be able to sell and, move on? I think that people, the way that you run your business, and we were talking about like, what are those, key success indicators? That's also defined by what your intentions are for your business. And you grow your business differently depending on what it is are looking to get out of it. So I just, what are your thoughts on that? Because I definitely think it changes your perspective.
It's spot on. And earlier we were talking about, the core mindsets or beliefs that make a good founder, and the longevity. And kind of what we're getting at here in different ways is it comes back to like being authentic to yourself.
Yeah.
If you are really passionate about being vegan and you come out with this vegan product, and then you have the opportunity to get into another retailer, but like you have to change the ingredients and to be able to supply it, and it starts to break away from your core values, don't do it. Because if you do it and then you get this immediate bump in growth or whatever it may be, your ability to have the longevity of success and happiness and keeping that tank full, like we were talking about earlier, you're not going to be able to do it. So stick to your authentic self and allow that to fuel you, because it's easy to just be yourself. It's really hard to fake it. People say fake it till you make it. That is the worst thing I've ever heard. You will never make it if you fake it. Is really how I feel about it, and staying true to your authentic self in that aspect is so important. I mean, I think about seeing somebody like a Justin Gold at a trade show, and everybody's coming up to him and talking to him, and he's telling his story for the 10 millionth time and has to keep the smile going. He's able to do it because it's part of who he is.
Yep.
And a lot of other people would just, at the end of the day, say, why am I doing this? I'm done. And so, if you want to grow and sell, is that true to your authentic self of what your life goals are? You want to retire on the island, or,
Right.
have your kids go to the best colleges or whatever it may be. Or if you don't necessarily care about that pathway and you want to raise a friends and family round and grow slowly, and you're mainly focused on like changing the way people eat, that's also awesome. If that is what is in your core, if you don't waver from that, all of the stress, all of the effort will be a lot easier.
Totally. And I think that comes down to also that company culture that you talked about. If you're being authentic, and it's just kind of oozes out of you because it's who you are, that is also going to be contagious, and that's going to make the day to day so much more enjoyable. And that fake it till you make it piece, I think you can, there's certain like little areas that you can do that in, like, in your app, in your marketing or something, you can talk about like as if, but ultimately you have to be authentic. You have to be truthful. That idea of transparency as a company culture is just vital, and people eventually can see through it, even in your advertising, in the way that you speak, or even in your products. If you start compromising, I mean, you think about when companies sell and the products change and the quality of the product changes, it's noted. So I think that's a really good point, and I agree with you. I think that that's a piece of it that if founders stay true, it really will make those hard days manageable.